Good morning. This is the second of the vacation videos. We are learning Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Rambam, the laws of Torah study of the Rambam. We are on Parak Aleph, Halacha Gimel, the first chapter and the third halacha. The Rambam says as follows: Chayev lischor melamed livno lamdo. A person is obligated to hire a teacher to teach his son. Now, this only means, obviously, if you're not going to be able to teach your son all the Torah that he needs, then you're obligated to hire somebody. Not that everybody is obligated to hire somebody to teach their children Torah. Ve'eno chayev lumod ben chavero el bechino. And a person is only obligated to ve'eno chayev lumod ben chavero el bechino. And a person has to teach their son of their friend, right, for free. Mishul lamdo aviv chayev lamdo it's asmo kishiyakir. Okay, somebody that Mishul lamdo aviv, somebody that's father hasn't taught them Torah. Okay, let's say that your father didn't know this halacha and he didn't realize that he had an obligation to teach you Torah, or to at least ensure the fact that you were taught Torah by somebody else. So chayev lamdo it's asmo kishiyakir. Right, then you're obligated to teach yourself, right? To hire somebody to teach yourself, and as you have to learn on your own, right? There's no excuse for ignorance in the Torah. And then the Rambam says something strange. He says, and you also find in every single place that Talmud, that learning comes before action. Because why does learning, in the precedent of which is more important and which should come first in our lives, why does learning always come before action? Because learning takes one to act. In other words, learning teaches somebody to act, and it brings you to action, while action never brings you to learning. Right? You see, people are very righteous in their actions, and they go but they're not wise. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the wisdom that's required of them. Right? So action never brings you to learning, but study always brings you to action. Right? That's the general principle. So therefore, we always say that learning comes according to one's action. Now, if learning brings one to one's action, and therefore learning comes first. Now, what I find strange about this halacha is I'm not really sure the connection. When the Rambam says the words v'chein atamotzi, v'chein, the word v'chein in Hebrew, and therefore, right? Therefore is a connecting phrase, right? You have a connecting phrase. So the statement before and the statement that comes after the word v'chein should be connected somehow, as we should learn one from the other. So the Rambam says here, he says as follows: somebody that's father hasn't taught them Torah, they're obligated to teach themselves. Therefore, you always find, right? You always find that learning leads to action, right? And therefore, you always find that learning comes before action, because learning leads to action. I'm not sure what the connection is there, right? And that's my question for you to answer today. I don't really understand what is the fact that you have to hire a teacher for yourself if your father hasn't taught you, have to do with the fact that learning comes before action. Why does the Rambam connect the two? Right, that's what's a little odd to me. So once again, the Rambam states that if your father hasn't hired a teacher to teach you Torah, so then you're obligated to hire somebody or learn on your own. Right? Everybody's obligated to learn. And the Rambam says that's why we find that in our order of what comes first, learning always comes before action, because learning leads to action. So what's the connection between those two statements? What's the connection between the fact that learning always leads to action to the idea that one has to hire themselves somebody to teach them Torah or learn on their own if their father hasn't taught them? Okay, going on to halacha daled. Haya hu rotze lilmod Torah v'yesh lo ben lilmod Torah. Who called him livno? Let's say you have a son and you haven't learned Torah and your son hasn't learned Torah, and you both will need to learn, right? Because you haven't learned. So you take precedence over your son. Let's say your son happens to be smarter than you. He has a greater potential in Torah scholarship. Then you should put your son ahead of you. But even if your son does come first, it doesn't mean that's it. You're exempt from the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Because just like he has an obligation to teach his son, so too he has an obligation to teach himself, to learn on his own. Okay, so again, our question comes from the first of the halachos, from halacha gimel, where it says that you have to hire yourself a teacher if you haven't taught yourself, and he says, and therefore learning comes before action. What's the connection between the two? Have a great day.